and welcome to Politically Unstable. I'm Kelly Sadler, the commentary editor at the Washington Times. Today, I'm joined by Sean Durns, who is a senior research analyst at Camera. Camera does important work in calling out the mainstream media in their anti-Israel bias. We've seen since October 7th, multiple news media get their stories wrong, which is, it's important to factually report these stories coming out of the Middle East, especially since we've seen such an uptick in anti-Semitism here in this country over the past decade, nearly a 900% increase. So, Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your insight and the work that you do. Could you briefly describe to our audience kind of your day-to-day and calling out the bias as you see it?
You bet. Thanks very much for having me, Kelly. It's a pleasure to be with you, even if the topic is so grim. Mm-hmm. So Camera works to ensure fair and accurate coverage of the Middle East and related issues, and that includes terrorism and anti-Semitism. So part of my job is dealing with reporters, editors, other analysts, other organizations to hold the media accountable, which, as we've seen this last 18 months and beyond, is something that is absolutely vital. We try and get corrections from different media outlets, and we basically try and ensure that the news is factual and accurate, which is quite the challenge these days.
So let's get into the Gaza Health Ministry being used as a source. This past weekend, we saw it be used by the AP, the Washington Post, all of the mainstream news media to perpetuate the narrative that Israel had, unleashed fire on Gazan civilians as they were going to get aid. A story that the IDF quickly debunked, saying that it wasn't true, but it went viral. And they've used the Gaza Health Ministry as a source, as their number one source, without any sort of backup sources to run with these stories, only then to have to correct them. I mean, the Gaza Health Ministry is Hamas, is it not? Is it not just a terror organization putting out their own propaganda?
That's exactly what it is, Kelly. The Gaza Health Ministry is a Hamas entity. Hamas is a U.S. designated terrorist group that calls for the destruction of Israel and genocide of Jews. It has murdered Americans. It has held Americans hostage. Ditto, of course, for Israelis, Europeans, and other foreign nationals. And that's exactly what the health ministry does. They release casualty stats that are wildly inflated, inaccurate, constantly revised, but nonetheless widely quoted by mainstream news outlets. And they do so for a reason. It's because there's also, in addition to the war that's going on in Gaza on the ground, you also have an information war. So there's an attempt to constrain Israeli military actions as they fight this genocidal terrorist group in Gaza. And that's basically what the health ministry works to upend. They're trying to constrain Israeli actions by shifting public opinion, by producing wildly inflated, inaccurate casualty stats and stories, for that matter, stories that they just make up out of thin air. And instead, you have the press just credibly quoting them. And one thing that I think is worth highlighting here, Kelly, is you have numerous other U.S. designated terrorist groups, Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Boko Haram, the list goes on. Yet, curiously enough, they're not treated as uncritical sources. Only Hamas, whose preeminent objective is the destruction of the Jewish state, is treated as an uncritical source. And I think that's an interesting discrepancy and a revealing one.
Can you talk to me about some of the most egregious errors that Camera has corrected since October 7th in the U.S. mainstream media, which is supposed to be unbiased? It's not supposed to have any sort of, be tilted toward Hamas or be tilted toward the Palestinians any more than it should be tilted toward Israel. It should be just neutral coverage of a war that's going on, overseas.
And that's exactly, to your point, that's exactly what Camera works to achieve. We just want facts to be out there and reporters to be careful and report the facts, not to indulge in speculation and not to uncritically parrot Hamas propaganda. And unfortunately, that's what they've been doing almost from day one. So the war's been going on for over 18 months now. And shortly after the war erupted, there was the Al-Ali hospital bombing. in which the media immediately said that 500 civilians have been killed in the hospital. It's a nice, nifty round number, 500 civilians. And in fact, that wasn't the case. The media was just parroting the Hamas Gaza Health Ministry. What we later on found out was it was an errant rocket fired by Islamic Jihad, which, like Hamas, is an Iranian proxy operating in Gaza, and an errant rocket which landed in the parking lot and may have killed 50 people. So that was, not even weeks into the war. And it's just perpetually gotten worse and worse. And many major news outlets, the Washington Post, Associated Press, among others, just continue to indulge in this. And they know better. And I know that they know better because we've called them out to it, to their face, repeatedly. In fact,
what is their response when you do that?
So their response, it differs. I will note that some reporters and some editors are more willing to own up to mistakes than others. And it's difficult to categorize by outlets. Some outlets tend to be more problematic, others less so. So it does vary a bit, but we know that they know this because weeks before October 7th, the Washington Post, for example, ran a report quoting the Gaza Health Ministry, and we sent them information which they published, basically telling the press that if you're going to quote Hamas, it's the equivalent to trusting a fox in the henhouse in terms of them as an uncritical source. And the Post published that. And this was before October 7th. So they know. They absolutely know. You've had former Reuters Jerusalem bureau chief Luke Baker, numerous U.S. administration officials from both parties, all note, do not trust the Gaza Health Ministry. And I think it's extremely revealing that many news outlets continue to do so.
Well, it's insidious at this point, knowing where the facts lay, where they are, who the Gaza Health Ministry is, to keep reporting it. You got to think that there's some sort of anti-Semitism within the ranks of those reporters putting out this propaganda. And that's what it is. It's propaganda and it's misinformation. But can you talk to me how this misinformation kind of gets into the hands of these college students or these radicals, like we saw this illegal, Egyptian alien in Boulder, Colorado over the weekend, taking a year to plan a hate terror attack against elderly Jewish citizens. One was a Holocaust survivor that are just walking every weekend to raise awareness of the hostages Hamas still has held captive even after 18 months.
Yes. Yeah, this is to your point. There's the old saying that the Holocaust started with words. Well, these are the words. And now we're seeing the effect, tragically. Whether it's in Boulder, whether it's burning down the mansion of the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro, or whether it's numerous other rising anti-Semitic attacks that have occurred in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere that are inflamed by parroting terrorist propaganda. And that's precisely what it is. Unfortunately, there's too few news outlets that are willing to call a spade a spade. I should note for your listeners and viewers that Washington Times is one of them. The coverage from the Times on these issues is substantially better than almost any other news outlet. So that's worth noting that there are actually good reporters, good editors out there. But by and large, the media's failed. And it's been a catalog of failures on the part of the mainstream media for years now. And this is a pretty egregious one. And unfortunately, as you noted, this led to an attack on multiple individuals in Boulder, Colorado, on American soil, where a Holocaust survivor was set on fire in 2025. Not 1925, 2025.
No, I mean, and it also radicalizes individuals like the one from Chicago who traveled to Washington, D.C. To attend a Jewish event, fired 21 rounds, killed a couple that were soon to be engaged, going to be traveling to Israel, took their lives way too early, and then just walked in nonchalantly to the event, was offered a glass of water, and when he was arrested, yelled "Free Palestine." Sean, I know this is not your expertise, but how do we, as a country founded on Judeo-Christian values, root out this rot that just seems to be festering, in higher education and among the progressive left who believe that, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, does not equivocate the total destruction of Israel?
Unfortunately, Kelly, we've got quite the task before us to do that. I think there's a broad perception, I would argue it's a correct one, that institutions writ large are failing throughout the United States. And the fourth estate is just one of them. There's a variety of reasons for that, but we see the after effects on college campuses where you have indoctrinated students, some of whom go off and murder people on the streets of Washington, D.C. So I think what has to happen here is there has to be a demand for accountability. Outlets that continue to publish propaganda from U.S. designated terrorist groups that murder and kidnap Americans and others should not be tolerated. They don't deserve your dollars. There are organizations, of course, Camera being one of them, that is working fastidiously on college campuses. We do have a college campus component and an education institute component, which work to address these myths, these lies. But it is quite the task. So we need support. Certainly, Camera does, because right now anti-Semitism is surging, and we're seeing the after effects on American streets, not just in Israel. And I'm worried that we're going to continue to see them if we don't call out media bias and anti-Israel bias, whether it's in Harvard or in the pages of the Washington Post.
Well, the work that you're doing is so very important. We appreciate your contributions to our pages, letting our readers know the truth. And they can make up their own minds about how they feel about the war. But it's not up to us to poison their minds with anti-Israel bias when the IDF is going to extreme measures to make sure that they conduct this war as humanitarianly possible that they can, knowing that it is a war and that innocent Jewish citizens were slaughtered on October 7th. And this war could end at any time if Hamas were to completely surrender and release all of the hostages that they still have held captive, which I believe is 56. Is that not correct?
It is a sizable number. And of course, Hamas is being less than forthcoming, which should be a clue to media outlets that maybe they don't make for a good source. But unfortunately, many media outlets have not picked up on that. There are a substantial number of hostages left. The war could end any day. And the suffering that Gazans have been dealt at the hands of Hamas can end any day if Hamas just sets down its arms. And the media needs to tell that story.
All right. Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your insight and the work that you're doing at Camera.
Thank you very much, Kelly.